Hey YouTube, what's up? Dr. T here in St. Petersburg, Florida. Here, part 2 of Hyperloop CEO Rob Lloyd's presentation at the 2017 Singularity University Global Summit. And we're looking at software Simulink representation of a Hyperloop perspective journey.
It's really important for us to remember that existing modes of transportation are the hubs of today's infrastructure. So we're seeing in many of the use cases we're developing today and working on with governments around the world that it is important to connect an airport. It is important to come in and in a different way connect to a major rail center that's in many European and US city centers. It is important to connect to the existing downtown centers where people want to live and work, yet at the same time, it's becoming so expensive to live in today's cities that we're pricing certain people out of the market. And imagine what it would feel like if you could live 150 miles away and still enjoy a job in San Francisco. Because my bone-crushing experience this morning from Los Gatos was demoralizing, frightening, and I didn't know whether I would be here or not. And of course, I got here so early that it's just not what we want anymore. We want a more predictable way in which we can balance job opportunities to participate in any industry and company, yet not have to move into the most expensive city centers that are developing around the world. By the way, it's a suite of solutions. There's not one Hyperloop. The one we all get excited about is the one that's going to see us in a pod going 1,000 kilometers an hour and ripping through some destination. But no, it's about sea containers, which would be a slightly different problem to solve. It's all about throughput, very rapidly moving containers away from our ports and not using the world's most valuable land in city centers to store steel cans. Maybe you can do that 150 miles inland in a dry port and then do the logistics and redistribution of those products. It's also about passengers, but those passenger pods that we imagine when we think of Hyperloop should also carry packages and cargo and light containerized freight. And then what about connecting factories and supply chains and an on-demand environment of Alibaba or of Amazon with smaller package-based Hyperloops? And I really see one running down the 280 and taking as much as that traffic off of our current constrained highways that are actually moving packages today. All three of those would be in the roadmap of what we're doing. I actually think that this is so important, and I've learned a lot moving from the networking industry and the transportation industry, that 30 minutes is a very special time. 30 minutes is the time that we felt comfortable in the agrarian era of how long we'd be happy to walk to a farm and walk home after a hard day's work. 30 days became the time that it was comfortable to ride a bicycle to a factory as we went through the Industrial Revolution. 30 days is what I felt, and I think my dad felt, was comfortable to drive his car from the suburbs to his job, or 30 minutes, if I'm saying days, it's 30 minutes, it's 30 days today. 30 minutes, and now we could actually rechange the meaning as to what it means to live in a city by making 30 minutes many multiple cities, regional cities. So the idea of a city transforms into something quite different than we think of today. And actually, it is 30 minutes when we sort of feel comfortable that that's our commute, or that's the time it takes for us to get to work. It's kind of the one that doesn't sap your energy and make you feel depressed when something goes wrong or you're trying to make a commitment at home. So remember 30 minutes, because in 30 minutes you can connect tens and tens and tens of millions of people in this country and in countries around the world, and completely redefine the cost of living for people to actually enjoy job opportunities anywhere. And I think that's a really big deal. Think of also the impact of having something that is going to facilitate this constant flow of demand for something now, whether it's inventory, very rapid manufacturing. I have seen at some of these events the idea of manufacturing 3D outsourcing centers and being able to move my product very quickly to a logistics center. It's this on-demand personalized environment. So we can see a lot of change in supply chain, a lot of change in manufacturing as we all move to just-in-time manufacturing in kind of a shared environment, reducing lead times, simplifying logistics, obviously reducing distribution, the amount of inventory that's in the supply chain. We did a little study with a well-known consulting firm, and you can take $10 billion out of a supply chain in just a regional hub. Because we will take trillions out of the combined supply chain around the world if you create a more efficient logistics system than we have today. The ports in the containers sitting outside of Los Angeles and Long Beach, they're days and sometimes weeks just to get into the port, and then days and weeks to handle that product, and then 3 to 5 days to get from Los Angeles to Chicago on a train. So if we can reduce that, it reduces significantly the costs in the global supply chain. You know, when I started with Hyperloop, it was 2 years ago, and I was sort of by default the chief sales guy. We also hired one other person in London who had been in the transportation business. And since Peter Diamandis was on our board, one of the first ideas we came up with was why don't we run a contest for where the best ideas are for Hyperloop? Why don't we enlist the community around the world that's as equally frustrated by the backlog of problems that are to be solved in transportation? So a year ago, we launched the Hyperloop One Global Challenge. We had an open source framework. We had Peter was advocating for us and doing videos, and we had 2,300 entrants. We looked at those entrants. We didn't have any idea what we would get out of this process. We really didn't know. But what we got back were phenomenal ideas of problems to be solved around the world, a pipeline approaching $34 billion of projects, which isn't a bad thing to build without a sales force, and deep engagement with state and national governments that were advocating, build a Hyperloop here. We have real challenges, and we can see the impact that you can bring by being the first Hyperloop in a region, and the advantages we'd bring to our economy and the ecosystem of application developers and others that could innovate on top of this platform. It's been fascinating. We didn't think the US would be a ripe opportunity. There's 8 active projects right now that start short and get longer as part of a much broader network, and dozens in Europe, and India has just come alive with the opportunities. So I really, really am excited about what we saw in terms of open sourcing this idea and bringing a community, including governments, engineering firms, universities, and people that just cared to bring together their ideas. We're going to announce actually in just 10 days who the winners are, and those winners we hope will continue to develop those projects with increasing level of specificity that can turn into the first Hyperloops in the world.
So I'll end here, and you can see the final part in part 3.